Good morning. It is a joy to be among you. It remains my honor and my privilege to be the minister of this congregation. There are complex, messy, difficult things going on in our wider world. Immigrants are being targeted in ICE raids. The economy is going through a particularly volatile period. Transgender people are facing hatred and legislative attacks at unprecedented rates, and so much more. Many of us cannot even take in the news each day. It's too much. We have to ration our attention and our outrage due to the onslaught of negativity. So that's a lot. Let's just breathe for a minute. The topic of the day, now that we've gotten that out of the way, Sartre famously said, "Hell is other people." When we think about that phrase, what Sartre intended by that is not that being in relationship is inherently hellish. What he meant is if your relationships are bad, you exist in a living hell. For better or for worse, the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our lives. As I brought up in my most recent sermon, John Donne said, "None of us are an island." Even the character in the film with Tom Hanks in Castaway made a companion out of a volleyball. We can't live in complete isolation. Human beings need each other. When babies are deprived of human contact, they die. We are created to attach to each other from the very beginning of our existence. We need each other to survive, quite literally. At General Assembly in 2016, Reverend Dr. Glenn Thomas Rideout led the choir in singing a song by David Fraser. The lyrics go like this: "I need you, you need me, we're all a part of God's body. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, you are important to me. I need you to survive." I firmly believe this to be true. We need each other from birth to death. Human beings are wired for connection and community. I remember a TV show in the 1970s called Grizzly Adams. As I recall, the main character was fleeing unjust persecution for a crime he did not commit. He could not prove his innocence, so he fled into the forest. He could not change the way that others saw him, so he left. In reality, in this modern world, nobody can live in complete solitude, even if we wanted to. And Grizzly Adams didn't. He had animal companions and sometimes human ones too. However, there was a man who tried. In GQ magazine, I stumbled across this story dated August 2014. It was entitled "The Strange and Curious Tale of the Last True Hermit." The man's name was Christopher Thomas Knight. He disappeared in 1986. He was discovered while burglarizing a home in Maine 27 years later. He hadn't been seen or spoken to another human being the entire time. When he was found, he was badly in need of eyeglasses and dental care. Over those 27 years, he had committed roughly 1,000 burglaries, all for essentials to survive. He had nearly frozen to death more than once. Maine, right? He had been quietly stealing what he needed from homes and businesses in the area for decades. Law enforcement didn't quite know what to do with him. How do you prosecute such a case? Do you prosecute such a case? He ended up spending a few months in jail and then going to live with his mother, who was still alive. Even he could not live his entire life without others. It is true that living in society with other people can be difficult, to say the least. Does it bother you when people don't do what they should? How can we make our kids pick up their socks or wash the dishes? Why does your neighbor need to play music so loudly? What about that guy who cut you off in traffic? Does your friend never call you unless they need something? Does your partner or spouse do things that make absolutely no sense to you? What can we do about such vexing problems? Can we force other people to change? Can we make people do what they ought to do by yelling at them, by pressuring them, by criticizing them? Can we simply demonstrate the logic of our position and they will suddenly realize the error of their ways and change the way we want them to? Can we send them suggestions, books, podcasts, articles, videos, other resources that will assist them in doing what we know they need to do? Can we fight for them, fight with them, fight on their behalf to get them to change? We can't rescue people from their problems. It is always up to the person themselves to change or not change, to stop using or get help or hit bottom or whatever it is. And help is available if you seek it, if it becomes clear that you aren't in control of yourself. That's why we have such a thing as an exception to the sanctity of the confidential relationship that people have with their doctor, their therapist, or their minister, who agree to keep whatever you tell them secret as long as you're not a danger to yourself or other people. And then if you aren't safe for others or from yourself, that's when authorities can step in. So I asked a question on my social media, what would you say about changing other people? And dozens commented. Some said love is not changing others, it's accepting them as they are. My friend Erin mentioned that it's egotistical to try because you have your own life to figure out. But another friend, who is a doctor at the University of Memphis, said this: re-socialization is the process of radically changing a person's identity, and most of it happens in total institutions, places where people are isolated from society and an administrative staff reshapes them into a more compliant individual. Prison is an example, and so is boot camp. This can create a person who is more compliant with authority, but is that really what our goal of changing people should be? To just go along with whatever they're told. Some become institutionalized, which means that they're unable to function without that institution. And that means that reintegration into society is not possible. So all of that to say, yes, it is possible to change other people, but the means by which we do it and the outcomes of doing so are highly problematic. So yes, we can force change. But as Dr. Murphy just said, I don't think breaking people the way she describes is a good thing. You might recall the famous scene from the film Dirty Dancing, in which the character played by Patrick Swayze is teaching the character played by Jennifer Grey how to dance. And he holds his arms like this, right? And he says, this is my dance space. This is your dance space. I don't go into yours. You don't come into mine. Trying to get other people to change is invading their dance space. That's why it's often said that people should stay in their lane, for example. And this is getting us to boundaries. What's a boundary? A boundary would be when you say, if this happens, I will respond in this way. It's not a threat, it's figuring out what your needs are and what you will and won't do. We can't force anyone in relationship to do anything, at least not ethically, in my opinion. I do want to point out, if we want to change others, we might want to consider if we have just a little bit of an issue with control. Because the only person we can actually change, ourselves. Controlling relationships are abusive relationships. If we're trying to change someone else, we might have some thinking we need to do. So my title today is somewhat misleading. How to change other people, because you kind of can't. But therapist Patrick Tehan says the definitive symptom of childhood trauma is trying to get a difficult person to be good to us. And how many of us have wasted days, months, or years trying to get somebody else to treat us better? Morgan Birch, a relationship coach, says that's the question that he gets the most. How do I get them to do the work too? I am doing the work, I am growing and healing, and I want them to come with me because I love them. But one of the most healing things about a lot of relationships is being willing to leave them. It's learning to be good enough to yourself to be willing to lose somebody if you have to. And then you start to set boundaries within yourself instead of trying to control another person. It's saying, I'm going to continue to heal. And if you don't want to heal, that's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you not my person. And it's okay to figure out what your personal needs are in regards to anything at all, and then convey those appropriately. It really is. I recently read a book called Scream-Free Marriage by Hal and Jenny Runkle. And in the book, the authors explain how trying to force, cajole, convince, or pressure someone to change doesn't work. So what does work? What helps people get along when they can't seem to agree? So the authors outline 3 steps: calming down, growing up, and getting closer. The example they begin the book with is one in which they were a young married couple with 2 small children. Hal would lay in bed, read the paper, and leave all the feeding, dressing, and clothing of the children to his wife. She would ask him for help. She would grumble at him. She would resentfully slam doors. She would do everything she could to get him to help with the kids. And the more she pushed, the further he dug in. It wasn't good. He lazed around, and he even made them late for church with his refusal to get moving or participate in the parenting. She got angrier and angrier. It became a very real problem between them. Until one day, she woke up to get the kids ready, and he continued his pattern of laying about in the bed. And he was about to step into the shower when she sweetly told him, without 1 ounce of resentment or pressure, that the kids and she were leaving in 10 minutes, and she would love for him to join them. Note, they only had 1 car. He was so shocked by this change in her, the lack of pressure or anger, her change of behavior, that he didn't shower as fast as he should have. He said he felt like he was in a daze. And when he finished the shower, he saw them getting in the car, and he pulled his clothes on, half buttoned. He grabbed his shoes in his hand, and he ran down the street to try to catch them. After they got to church and delivered the kids to their classes, she said, without a trace of irony, "I'm really glad you could join us." Without pressure or anger from her, he had to look at himself. He had to face his behavior and his part in what was happening. So what are the steps that worked this miracle? Jenny had to consider her part of the issue. Her nagging and her rageful behavior was feeding into his attitude. She had to figure out what she wanted. Was it to force him to change? No, her goal was actually just to get the kids dressed and ready and to get to church on time. She could do that with or without her spouse, but she definitely appreciated him coming along as well. So she had to contemplate what role she played, consider what her needs were, what she wanted, and then focus on the only person that she could change. She looked at her attitudes, her words, and her behavior, and then she had to calm down, grow up by focusing on herself, and get closer by stating her intentions clearly without any anger or resentment. And regardless of how he may or may not have chosen to respond, she had to stay centered in her own maturity. And that's not an easy task. This is the formula for behaving maturely in relationships. And it's the formula for behaving maturely in any situation, and the real answer to the question of how do we change others. We have to focus on ourselves. What part did we play? And focus on our response. I didn't make the clerk be rude to me at the grocery store, but did I maintain my equanimity in return? Negativity fuels negativity. And in parenting, if we're able to take a deep breath and remain centered in our own stuff, our feelings, our prejudices, our fears, our needs, our goals, it's only then that we can be fully present to our children and remain centered in our values. And this prevents us from yelling or blaming or trying to force them to pick those socks up off the floor. Dr. Paul Jenkins, a parenting expert, says our job as a parent is to love our kids no matter what and even if. I love that phrase. In friendship and work relationships, it's the same theme. We can't change anyone else, but we can change how we think and act and behave around them. We can ask ourselves, what story are we telling us about them inside our head? And maybe we can shift that narrative. Maybe they did intend some kind of disrespect or harm, but maybe they had a recent health diagnosis, or somebody that they love was just in an accident. We can never know what's going on inside another person unless they tell us. We aren't mind readers. The only person that we can be certain of is right here. I also recently read a book, A Complaint-Free World by Will Bowen, and he emphasizes how complaining about or to anyone else is toxic. Why? Because if we truly want anything to be different, we must share our feelings vulnerably with the person that we're upset with. Unless your safety and well-being are in danger, complaining about others is ultimately going to make things feel worse. You might feel good in the moment, but it'll feel worse later, because it's still going to be happening. The situation will continue, and now you've emphasized and reinforced a grudge against whomever or whatever it is. And this is different than going to a neutral third party or somebody up the hierarchy with power to make things different, right? So if complaining doesn't help, what helps? Being conscious of what's going on in here and in here, right? Centering in your own needs and values, vulnerably and directly approaching a person that you have a problem with and just saying, hey, can we talk about this? Just expressing how you feel. So the book's goal is to demonstrate how one can live quite happily without complaining about anything or anyone at all. And I know that sounds hard to believe, very hard to execute, but that's his thesis. He says that if you shift the narrative you're telling yourself about a person or situation, then things are going to change because it shows in your words, your demeanor, and your actions, and the relationship can improve. This is like a laundry list of books I've read, so here we go again. I also recently finished The Cow in the Parking Lot, a Zen approach to overcoming anger by Leonard Sheff and Susan Edmiston. And what they say in this book is our reactivity and our anger make things worse. Learning how to control ourselves and choosing not to express anger can transform your life. The example they give is the same as the title. Imagine you're in a parking lot, trying to find a place to put your car. You see a spot, you put on your blinker. Suddenly another car zooms into the spot and takes your place. The driver gets out of his Jeep and he flips you off as he walks briskly away from his car. Are you angry? Could you yell at him? He might yell back. Would it change anything? Now imagine instead of a car, a cow ambles in front of you and flops down in the parking spot. Are you angry? How do you feel? Are you laughing? Would your anger change anything about the cow that has just flopped into your parking spot? It is in controlling ourselves that we find a more mature adult, grown-up response to life's situations. And therefore, the ripple effects from our maturity can vastly improve our relationships, which begins to change our world, one conversation at a time. One of my professors in seminary, Dr. Barbara Holmes, who passed away last year, said this: "We are not hamsters on a wheel waiting to fall into the cedar shavings at the bottom of the cage. We are seekers of light and life, bearers of shadow and burden. We are struggling to journey together towards moral fulfillment. We are learning to embrace the unfathomable darkness where God also dwells. Awareness is the moment where we rise to catch a glimpse of the divine in the face of the other." If we can grow in maturity and remain in relationship, even when we disagree, then we are heir to the greatest gift this human life can bestow: intimacy and connection. John Denver said, "I believe that we are here for each other, not against each other. Everything comes from an understanding that you are a gift in my life. You are all gifts in my life. May we find beauty in facing our own wounds, allowing other people to do their inner work along our shared journey towards wholeness, so that we may grow closer and more authentic in all our relationships. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.